Jesus consistently preached belief in God. This was unpleasant for the Pharisees, who only pretended to keep the law while pursuing their own interests. They tried to eliminate Jesus somehow but did not succeed. This time, I would like to explore why the innocent Jesus was crucified.
In the era when Jesus lived, Judea was under Roman rule. Since returning from the Babylonian captivity, despite changes in ruling nations from Greece, Syria, to Rome, the walls and the temple rebuilt by the Jews remained, and it seems there were no special restrictions or constraints. Particularly, Rome delegated authority to the governors of each province, and as long as taxes were paid to Rome, there was no significant regulation on Judean customs. The Jews were given a degree of freedom to worship their God in the temple and to hold their traditional festivals. Within Judean territory, appointing a Jewish king was not a problem. And as long as the governor collected loyalty and taxes for Rome, there was little interference. Rather, the governors were more concerned with preventing rebellion or uprisings against Rome. And as long as those rules were not broken, they turned a blind eye to Jewish customs and traditions.
In such an environment, the Pharisees, who adhered to the Jewish law, wielded authority among the Jews. Their roots are thought to go back to the time of the return from Babylonian captivity and the rebuilding of the temple, when those who studied the law emerged. These people are considered to be the origin of the Pharisees.
It is said that there are 613 laws written in the Bible. Of these, 248 are commandments that urge action, such as do this or observe this. The remaining 365 are prohibitions that advise against certain actions, saying you must not do this. During the Roman rule of Judea in which Jesus lived, some of these laws were interpreted in a quite distorted manner. The Pharisees watched over people's lives, and if anyone was seen violating the commandments, they would report them to the priests, resulting in severe punishment. Farmers who worked their fields to earn their daily bread would stay out of the fields, and shopkeepers would close their stores. This was seen as a commandment that could be judged by common sense. However, the Pharisees of Jesus' time had a different view. Despite this, gathering in synagogues and listening to the words of the Bible on the Sabbath was permitted. The Jews ensured that they lived within a kilometer of the synagogue, so that walking to the synagogue would not be considered labor. Jesus also gathered in synagogues and sometimes read from the scriptures. However, when Jesus healed people, the Pharisees immediately considered it an act of labor and accused him. Similarly, when Jesus and his disciples walked through the fields and rubbed grain heads with their hands to eat the grain, they were accused of threshing and violating the Sabbath. Peter reported that the Pharisees asked Jesus whether he would pay the tax. To avoid causing others to stumble by not paying the tax, Jesus instructed Paul to go fishing. As Paul did so, he found a coin in the mouth of the first fish he caught, which was used to pay the tax for both Jesus and Paul.
Paying Roman taxes had no connection with the biblical laws, but Roman officials did not pursue Jesus on this issue.
One day, a woman caught in the act of adultery was seized and brought before Jesus. According to the law, she would be put to death by stoning. However, Jesus said to the crowd, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her," and then began to write something on the ground. One by one, the people dropped their stones and left, until no one remained. Jesus looked up and, seeing no one around, asked the woman, "Where are your accusers?" She replied, "There is no one." Jesus then said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin."
Although Jesus himself did not commit adultery, he defended the woman who was supposed to be stoned and forgave her. In Jewish society, those who violated the law could be put to death by stoning. Rome seemed to tolerate such acts as part of Jewish customs, although issuing a death sentence arbitrarily was not permitted. For instance, a robber like Barabbas would be under Roman jurisdiction. Rome adopted a policy that allowed a certain degree of recognition of Jewish laws within Judean society.
After being arrested, Jesus was taken to the high priest's house. Various accusations were made before the high priest, but none could be substantiated. The primary concern of the high priest and the other priests was whether the Messiah prophesied in the scriptures had indeed appeared. As a final question, the high priest asked Jesus, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the living God?" Jesus answered, "I am," and this response became the decisive factor leading to the decision to sentence him to death for blasphemy against God.
At that time, the Jews were under Roman rule and could not independently conduct trials or execute death sentences. The governor of Galilee held the authority under Roman law, and a person could be sentenced to death if the governor judged it so. However, Pilate could not sentence Jesus to death solely for blasphemy against God.
Pilate was the governor of the Galilean region and had the authority to enforce Roman law. The Jews brought Jesus to Pilate because they needed Pilate to pronounce the sentence. Since the accusation was based on Jewish customs, Pilate sent Jesus to Herod. Pilate likely wanted to avoid dealing with a troublesome matter. This is evident when Pilate, making the final decision, washed his hands and declared, "I am innocent of this man's blood." Herod met Jesus with a sense of curiosity, similar to meeting a magician who performs miracles. However, when Jesus did not answer or perform any miracles, Herod lost interest and quickly sent Jesus back to Pilate.
The Bible mentions that Pilate and Herod were not on good terms. However, they became friends over the issue of handling Jesus.
Pilate could not treat Jesus lightly given the accusations from prominent figures like the high priest and chief priests in Jewish society. Pilate was astonished that Jesus offered no defense and did not plead for his life. From Pilate's observation of Jesus' character, he did not seem like the madman or criminal the priests claimed. Pilate found no significant threat to Rome in Jesus. Gradually, Pilate realized that the accusations were primarily about Jewish customs. Ultimately, the Jews' charge that Jesus had blasphemed against God was of no concern to Pilate, the governor of Galilee. It had no impact on Rome. Even if Jesus claimed to be the king of the Jews, Pilate did not see it as a cause for societal chaos. Pilate decided to release Jesus and informed the Jews of his decision.
From reading the Bible, it appears that there was a significant gap between Pilate's and the Jews' perspectives. The Jews seemed to resist having their established society of laws and self-made rules disrupted.
Pilate had no Roman law under which to execute a man claiming to be the king of the Jews. Moreover, there was no solid evidence from Jesus' own words. To Pilate, whether Jesus was delusional or a liar, it seemed like something that could be ignored. Pilate could not understand why the priests and scribes were so enraged. However, Jesus' silent, sincere demeanor, without any defense, gradually led Pilate to suspect that perhaps the problem was not with Jesus, but with the priests and scribes causing the uproar. The Bible does not record Pilate declaring that Jesus should be crucified. Instead, Pilate washed his hands before the people, demonstrating that any punishment of Jesus was not his responsibility. Those who called for the crucifixion were the scribes and priests who had been opposed to Jesus.
Jesus preached that loving God and loving people were the core of the law, covering all 613 commandments if these two were upheld. This was not a new teaching, but rather a distillation of the most crucial aspects of the law, emphasizing heart over mere compliance.
World history often portrays Pilate as pronouncing Jesus' death sentence. However, Pilate likely feared a Jewish riot and thought that yielding to their demands would maintain his standing with the Roman emperor. As a result, what followed seemed like a madman being crucified and dying. Ultimately, the Jewish unrest continued, leading to a revolt against Rome 40 years later, which ended in a devastating defeat and dispersion of the Jews worldwide. This outlines the events leading to Jesus' crucifixion. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to the channel.